Great. Hi, everyone. Today we're going to be looking to analyze the Green IT Matters at Wipro Ltd case. My name is Maddy, and I am with my colleagues Izabella and Mathilde. We are currently in our last year at Des Hôtels Faculty of Management at McGill, and we are going to be doing this for a project for our sustainability class. I'll be focusing on the current situation of Wipro, and then we'll be moving into more of an analysis and recommendation for the company. Wipro is a global company focused on information technology-enabled services, and in 2009, they were looking to evolve their green IT plan and implement both tactical and fundamental mid-course corrections within the plan. Beginning in 2006, Wipro had set a company goal to become carbon neutral by 2014, implemented green IT practices that were one of a kind in their main operating company in India. The company set up an Eco-Eye Governance Council, which endorsed 120 projects that focused on carbon neutrality. As briefly mentioned above, Wipro was one of the only companies in India at the time working to implement green IT practices. The process was relatively new and was evolving quickly. In developed countries such as the US and within Europe, there was legislations being put in place that focused in electrical waste and hazardous substances. However, for developing countries, such as China and India, they did not have carbon neutral and environmental frameworks put in place and were also found exempt from a lot of the universal practices such as the Kyoto Protocol. Although India currently has no legislations in place, the head of Wipro spoke on the issue and said, while they wait for these issues to reach the developing countries, this presents a business opportunity for IT companies in India to gain a head start over the rest of the market, such as creating a competitive advantage over certain competitors. For Wipro specifically, they are focusing on green IT for three main reasons: regulatory, physical, and general. Some of their green IT initiatives include setting up 2 subsidiaries to show its commitment to their eco-business, Wipro Water to provide total solutions in water management, Wipro Eco Energy to offer customized solutions in clean energy in all industries, and they eventually began the process of moving from green IT to IT for green by being involved in multiple businesses such as lighting products, BPO and consulting, and water and eco energy. The company was beginning to face some issues in the green IT space and was proven difficult to structure a metric around relative performance within the green IT industry due to the lack of competition in the Indian market. The CEO was also asking himself whether or not he should be focusing his efforts and actions in the short term, medium term, or long term to better project the success of Wipro's green initiative. Within the next part of our podcast, we'll be looking to answer, how do you execute a strategy for becoming carbon neutral? How do you measure it? And what should be turned green? I'm now going to pass it on to my colleague, Mathilde.
Thank you. I'll now be talking about the important elements to consider for our recommendations for Wipro. Concerning Wipro's relationship with regulatory frameworks, India was expected to sign the Kyoto Protocol in 2012, and through this agreement, India would commit to reducing GHG emissions. This will impact Indian firms' operation, as they will have to limit their carbon emissions and navigate stricter environmental regulation frameworks. Wipro was insulated from environmental regulatory requirements in the US and Europe because the company's business was based on an offshoring model, so while they were servicing customers internationally, they were operating from India, thus making their carbon footprint India-based. Wipro was mainly operating in the IT service industry, which was exempt for environmental regulation, which mostly targeted physical goods. Wipro had already established multiple alternatives to make the companies more sustainable in the early 2000s. For example, they came up with multiple process efficiency solutions for a non-IT client, such as hosted intelligent document management, which help clients manage and store paper and electronic documents. They also created a eFrank Cargo suite of tools, which allowed clients to use a single interface connecting airlines, freight forwarders, and customs to enable paperless interactions and multi-format transmission of data. As for social solutions, they had Wipro applying to schools, which they initiated in 2001, which was aimed at improving the quality of primary education in India. This solution provided nearly 125 hours of training to over 2,500 teachers and principals from 100 schools. The company also came up with WIRPO Cares, which was an in-house program mobilizing WIRPO employees and their family to volunteer and participate in social causes. As for their environmental approach, they started by doing a greening of IT internally, and then they were helping a client with green solutions, so greening through IT, which was done mainly externally. They also came up with EcoI, which included a green procurement policy. So they asked their top 50 suppliers by value to disclose their GHG and water footprint. They also had a customer stewardship initiative, which was aimed at helping WIRPO customers to reduce their carbon footprint. And then they had one WIRPO, which was an integrated portfolio of solution comprising IT for green IT, clean energy, water, and lighting. At the time, Wipro was positioning as a sustainability industry leader in India. Indeed, it was among the earliest companies in India to get an ISO certification, providing its commitment to improving environmental management through product back services and auditing of recycling vendors. So as a leader, Wipro had the power to influence other IT companies to improve their impact and create an industry-wide change. As for Wipro's business segment, they had a hardware segment, which was expected to grow by 12 to 40%, 14% annually from 2010 to 2012. Hardware represented a total of 40% of IT spendings, and Wipro had already established a protocol to track product lifecycle from design, manufacture to final disposal. Wipro was also one of the only 3 companies in India implementing take-back services on the ground, and at the time, only 3% of e-waste reached authorized recyclers. So there was an opportunity for Wipro to expand in that business. As for the software business segment, it was kind of a gray area. So there weren't many metrics at the time that they could rely on to compare to competitors. And then for the service industry, was expected to grow at an annual rate of 6%. And Wipro had 2 advantages in the IT service category. First of all, they could leverage labor arbitrage because the software developer costs about $60 per hour in the US, but only $6 per hour in India. They also had a great educational infrastructure, which would churn out 3 million universities graduates each year from the engineering and medical field. Now moving on to the challenges for green IT implementation. It was mentioned that any new initiative had to cope with resistance to change from some employees. So initiatives pushed by senior management tended to yield dramatic and high-profile impacts, but they would result in low employee engagement and the project's endurance wasn't guaranteed. As for project launched through a bottom-up initiative, they could yield less impressive results in the short term, but could be more widely accepted by employees and therefore lead to a more sustainable impact in the long term. Wipro also had to ensure that green IT was perceived by employees as a core element of the company's culture, rather than as a flavor of the month. Wipro also operated under a decentralized structure, meaning that it was up to each line of business to deliver results on a green initiative, which made it challenging for the green IT team to have control over the company's progress on reducing its carbon footprint. There was also an overlap among the CSR, EcoI, Green IT, and IT for Green segments. And to build an efficient company-wide action plan to target carbon emissions, Wipro had to find a way to facilitate collaboration within all the different lines of business to ensure that all the segments are working in symbiosis to reach a common objective. Carbon management initiatives were also not absolute, they were relative, meaning that Wipro's environmental performance was measured in terms of its competitors' performance. Therefore, establishing a metric for Wipro was difficult due to the lack of Indian industry benchmark. Moving on to IT as a new revenue stream, Wipro wasn't scared to diversify from its core business by creating subsidiaries to prove its commitment to sustainability. They created Wipro Water in 2008, which provided total solutions in water management for customers. They also invented Wipro Eco Energy during that same year, which offered customized solutions in clean energy to clients in all the industry. One Wipro also offered consulting services around portfolio of solutions to improve the customer's environmental footprint. Furthermore, they had carbon management solution, which enabled the company to participate in carbon trading markets by selling their carbon credits to heavy emitters. They also had an e-waste disposal services, which counted 16 collection centers across India. They also created Wipro Greenware, which was a range of eco-friendly computers. And with that product, they had a first mover momentum since they were the first Indian IT company to create these kind of computers, which represented a competitive advantage. As for competitors' alternatives, IBM was mainly focused on energy efficiency, so they were increasing data centers' computing capacity without increasing power consumption of GHG emissions. They were also focusing on green financing by offering more beneficial loan terms to companies to finance energy efficiency projects. As for HP, they owned e-waste recycling plants. They were targeting energy consumption reductions and regularly auditing their top vendors to assess their environmental impact. As for SAP AG, they focused on environmental health and safety management solutions. They also had a target for GHG emission reduction and had established a cross-functional sustainability organization led by the Chief Sustainability Officer. Analyzing competitors' initiatives in terms of green IT would help Wipro to figure out the strategy that will create the most value for the company and for the environment. Indeed, Wipro could adopt a cost leadership strategy by specializing in the same environmentally conscious product or services as their competitors, but offering them to their clients at a lower cost. On the other hand, Wipro could also use a differentiation strategy and offer clients a sustainable product or service that is not currently offered by their competitors. As for the green objectives timeline, in the short term, Wipro hoped to identify projects that would yield high and demonstrable benefit to help green IT to gain credibility from all stakeholders. They also aimed to focus on challenges that would be addressed using universal and centralized guidelines issued by the green IT team. In the medium term, determination of green metrics and targets for each line of business. And they also wanted to create an enterprise-wide information system for data synthesis and analysis. Finally, in the long term, they hoped to make each employee environmentally conscious. They hoped to making being environmentally conscious a priority for Wipro employees on a personal level. I'll now pass it on to my colleague Izabella.
Thank you, Mathilde. So, you've really painted this awesome picture for us of how Wipro's strategy has evolved over time. They've developed this really robust kind of plan and expanded into kind of those three areas of software, services, and hardware. And really, we see the power of technological ecosystems coming up here. It's very sticky when you're able to offer your clients all these different services to meet all their needs. Think of Apple, how we have a phone, we have the headphones, we have the laptop, and this really increases brand loyalty as well. And this increases competitiveness for Wipro and increases barriers of entry because it makes switching costs that much higher for loyal customers. And also they were a first mover in this space. So they've really been able to establish themselves as a leader in this space. And when we look at sustainable oriented innovation, we really see that this falls under kind of the third category of societal change. They're really focusing on coming up with these new streams of green revenue, novel products and services, and they're doing good with others. We see this through their engagement with their value chain. having that customer stewardship program, and also their green procurement policy. They're really engaging with everyone important to make a more holistic change. And I think this sets a really great example of things to learn and to apply within the sustainability technology space as well. And this is really the strength that we want to build on for our actual recommendation of what they should do going forward. So they've really positioned themselves seamlessly between green IT and IT for green. And the space within green IT actually has gone up quite a bit and advanced due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So while their goal was in this sector was to focus on helping companies bring down their emissions by switching to technology, whether for teleconferencing, decreasing employee commutes, minimizing transaction delays, we see that COVID really spurred this in 2020. And so I think the area of growth in this space is maybe not as big as within IT for green. But we see that this case was written a decade ago. And even then, a decade prior to that was when Microsoft started implementing a lot of these ideas. So we see demand within this space at the time of the case was very high. For example, Microsoft really changed the way that they actually did work. They encouraged you to do individual work in the digital realm while you leveraging the physical workspaces to be more collaborative spaces. So while this space is the one that wasn't occupied at the time, when we evaluate this case today in 2023, I think this area is quite saturated for their expansion. But really it is impactful at the time because, for example, looking at IBM, for every 100 kilowatt hours of electricity, they were only getting 3 kilowatt hours of productive work. So during this time in those early 2000s, really making technology efficient was a priority for sustainability. So this included everything from power management, virtualization, and as Mathilde mentioned, recycling of e-waste. Now, what I think our recommendation really falls on is future opportunities within greening through IT. We know what a big challenge it still is for companies today to actually be able to collect data, disclose it, do it properly. Regulation has not kept up, even a full decade after this case was written. And I think this is an opportunity that still exists within the industry. So creating software and scenario analysis for climate change, tools for auditing energy, using smart sensors for data collection and optimizing monitoring. These are all things that Wipro has already started to dabble in, but they're really things you can expand upon. And this is really powerful for helping companies conduct that full life cycle analysis of what their sustainable footprint is, from materials to processing to manufacturing, distribution, end of life use, engaging with different parts of their value chain, leveraging those smart sensors to really get an idea of what is happening at each stage of your product lifecycle and being able to communicate between all stakeholders in the process. This can be a great way to help companies actually collect data on what their sustainable impact is. There's an age-old saying that what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed, and that's so true with regards to sustainability. And in the context today, you really need that data and, those software algorithms to help automate this process because it's so laborious. And actually the process, for example, for collecting scope emissions is often a burden that falls on parts of the organization that are not used to this type of high levels of data collection. So the more ways that you can leverage technology to collect this information, the better and the easier for your clients. And I think this is an opportunity that really does exist and fit within kind of the goal and the core purpose of Wipro. And in the context today, actually, we see that a lot of regulation is moving towards this direction. So there's going to be even more demand from companies to figure out just exactly how to disclose very sustainable information. So today, regulation by the SEC is proposed to actually mandate reporting of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And for investors, 53% actually identified poor availability of data as the biggest ESG challenge. So there's so much regulation coming in, and also the amount of standards and disclosures that companies have to align to is massive. For example, in Europe, there's over 250 different standards. So navigating this space, figuring out what to report, figuring out how to do it, and making sure you're aligned is a big burden that's about to be regulated, audited, and gonna fall on companies. So if Wipro can step in and help make this process easier, I think that's a big selling point and a great way they can add value to their customers, pardon me. And we had Doug Parker come into our class and talk about this from Ecolumnix, and he really highlighted what a big challenge data is. And that first step really is the disclosures from companies. So I think this is a great way for them to come in, help make the data easier. And even for ESG ratings providers, ratings are only correlated about 54%. So that's really low. And if they can step in and help companies track, report, and give meaning to data, This supplies better info to all stakeholders of the ESG space, and there's going to be massive demand. So this is what our recommendation